Hi, you're listening to Kate Palmer. Today I'm going to show you a technique called brushed gesso, and I'm going to use this to make a really quick Christmas card. For the first step, you'll need a flat or fan brush. You can use a normal brush if you need to. I'll be using some white gesso primer from Global. You can use any white paint, as long as it's water-based. Dip the very tip of the brush into the gesso. You only want a really tiny amount of paint for this, and then spread it in little patches over the white cardstock. I spread mine in a cross-hatched kind of pattern, just for a little bit of extra texture. Now, less is more here, you don't want to overdo it. Leave the gesso to dry. Once it's completely dry, apply starburst stains over the top. I'm using two colours from Lindy's Stamp Gang. The first is Voodoo Violet Blue, which is a really strong, intense, dark colour, so I haven't used it much. And the second is Frosty Forest Green, which is from the new Christmas set. This next step is heaps of fun. It's really random, you can never tell what it's going to turn out like. You just have to trust that it will end up looking beautiful when you're finished. Start with the darkest colour or the lightest colour, it doesn't really matter for this one. Make sure that you apply in a random fashion. To achieve a highly varied look, make sure that in some areas you rub on the starburst stain, and in others you splatter it on. And by this I mean you've given it a really good shake so it's nice and shiny, and you squeeze the bottle as you sort of dab it onto the cardstock. This will leave a darker, shinier patch than those areas where you've just sort of rubbed it on using the dauber cap. So, time for the second colour. As you can see, I've only covered about half of the cardstock with the first colour. With the second colour, repeat that process. So in some areas, rub the dauber cap onto the card, and in other areas, dab it on and really make sure that you're getting lots of ink onto the paper there. The only thing you really have to do for this technique to work is to make sure that you haven't purposefully left any white spaces. So you need to cover every inch of that cardstock until all you can see is colour. At this point you could go back and add a little more of the first colour if you want to, but bear in mind this is so random, you're really going to have difficulty predicting the finished outcome. You can see here that this is beginning to dry already. Now the beauty of this is as it dries, that white gesso makes the background really multi-tonal. You get a whole variety from dark to light of those two colours. It's absolutely beautiful. Why does this happen? It's because the gesso acts as a resist for the starburst stains. This resist is what helps give you a beautiful background to stamp on. I'm going to let this one dry and then we'll move on to the next step. What I've got here is a Versamark watermark stamp pad, some of the beautiful Midnight Pewter Obsidian embossing powder from Lindy's Stamp Gang, the beautiful background that I've just created, and one of the stamps from Stamp It, which is one of the Christmas stamps. The first step is to ink up the stamp quite generously with the ink. Now this is clear ink. You could use a colour if you like, but there's no real point since you're going to be embossing with such a dark colour. Grab the stamp. And stamp as close to the edge as you can. Make sure that the corners have made contact. There's nothing worse than a patchy image. Remove the stamp and apply the embossing powder. Tap off any excess. And put all that powder back into the bottle. This is the embossing powder on the stamped background. Now this is before it's been heated. Watch this. If you watch closely here, you can actually see the embossing powder changing colour. You'll notice it starts to get really shiny. It reaches the right temperature and turns from a powder into a liquid. At that point, move the embossing on. You don't want to overheat it and burn it into the cardstock. Now, I've chosen this really quick, simple card because it usually takes me months to make all of my Christmas cards, and currently that's time I just don't have. So I've chosen something that's really quick, really simple, and you could easily make 20 in a weekend. I hope you're enjoying this. I had lots of fun making these. Heat until it's nice and uniform and it's all raised. Look how beautiful that is. Look at that colour. It's not a flat black like you would usually get. It's got this, I don't know, almost a pewter shimmer through it. It's really, really pretty. This is probably my favourite embossing powder that I've used so far. Matches really perfectly with that beautiful sparkly background. I've used the French Flair stamp from Stampin' Up! To help create a background for my panel. The panel is made of those individual pieces of the stamp, which I've then cut up, mounted onto red cardstock, and put on this really stark white background as a contrast. You can see I've added little embellishments to each of the panels. On this one I used red stickles, it's really cute and sparkly. Then I've coloured in the word Noel with some white gel pen. Gotta love those little reindeers. On this next panel I've simply used some water-based markers to colour in the flowers and the leaves, just to add a little bit of extra colour. On the Joy panel I've again used the red stickles, but I've used it really sparingly so it doesn't overpower this because it's a small panel. Up the top I've used some adhesive pearls and crystals. I have a little bit of a thing for these. They appear on most of my cards. I just love them. Just to add a little bit of bling to the snowflakes. So there it is, my quick and simple Christmas card. I think it's only appropriate that it uses my favourite product for this year, which is the Starburst Stains from Lindy's Stamp Gang. I just wanted to say a big Merry Christmas to everybody. I hope you all have a safe and happy holiday, and I'll see you again next year. Bye!